Okay, we're back. Always a delight to have Dr. Joel Klein in the studio with us today. He's with Ventana Wellness, and he just kind of lights up the room when he comes in here. I don't know if it's pre-Thanksgiving or just him being a neat guy, but we're going to talk about something today that is huge, absolutely huge, and this is National Diabetes Month. However, the whole subject of diabetes, Dr. Klein, is just mind-boggling to me because every time I see the numbers are going up.
It's horrible.
It's frightening.
As we just said, even the CDC estimates that by 2050, a third of this country will be diabetic.
A third? That's epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely horrible. And yet the real causes of it, which we can certainly talk about, are not being addressed.
Okay, I want to get into that, but let's talk about it in some layman's term. Right. Type 1, type 2.
Very simply, they had to use those designations. Type 1 is the insulin-dependent diabetes, that happens more acutely in children when they get acutely ill, very sick, and have to take insulin because their body's not making insulin.
Okay.
Type 2 used to be called adult-onset diabetes until after high-fructose corn syrup became ubiquitous in our food supply, and we started getting 16-year-olds with it. So now they call it type 2, which is actually a disease of insulin resistance. Insulin levels are actually high in the body, which causes problems, but the body stops responding to it. So the diabetes just comes from the fact that blood sugar is elevated, but there's two completely different reasons. One's actually a deficiency of insulin, the other is a resistance to it.
All right, if not treated, what happens?
Everything in the body will break down, accelerates every aging process known. Certainly the high blood sugars, the sugar starts attaching itself to proteins in the body so that we have eye disease, kidney disease, heart disease, and really especially the type 2 diabetic process is associated, and actually the cause of that is our old friend inflammation, which basically accelerates every aging process in the body. And you can wind up other things with nerve damage and other far-flung complications from that.
All right. Some of the symptoms of diabetes are those who may not know they have it.
Well, a lot of times they don't. In these days, we see people with mild diabetes who have no symptoms at all. The common symptoms, what we used to find is when people's blood sugar was elevated, they were thirsty all the time, they had to urinate all the time, they were hungry all the time, and blurry vision, fatigue. Those will be the typical ones. But now we see mild diabetics who really don't have any of those symptoms because you have to have fairly high blood sugar for it to start manifesting with those symptoms.
All right, so how's it detected? I mean, is it a blood test?
It's a blood test,
okay,
basically.
Okay, and it shows up how? I mean,
as high blood sugar. The mistake has been that the disease has been thought to be characterized, especially, and we're going to talk mostly about the adult onset, the type 2. The type 1 is a really whole different discussion, and actually for our population, there are some out there, but the overwhelming majority of the folks in this area are going to have type 2. For the type 2, yes, mostly the elevated blood sugar is what we find, and that is what, again, has been thought to be the diagnosis of it. But that turns out the high blood sugar is actually just one result of the underlying process of this insulin resistance.
Wow.
But the sugar is the basic diagnosis.
All right. These numbers are unbelievable, and it's getting worse. Is the main contributor to this sugar?
Diet in general, but it's actually it's our friends, the unholy trinity of diet, stress, and environmental toxins are actually all playing a role in diabetes. And yes, you may inherit a tendency in your family, but there's not a gene for diabetes. There's a family of metabolism inherited traits, usually from people who came from areas where there is not a lot of food, like the Pima Indians of the Southwest, or Northern Europeans who ate more of a hunter-gatherer diet. There's more of the genes that these people had to hold on to all of their calories because they had nothing during the winter. So you may inherit the genetic tendency, but then you combine that with the American diet, the American lifestyle, and our polluted environment, because the toxins are being found to be playing some role in this as well. All of those combine to make the diabetes, but the diet is the primary issue.
All right, but diabetes itself is not genetic, or it can be genetic?
Okay, this may sound like like semantics, but the truth is very few diseases are just purely genetic where there is a gene and you inherit it. What we inherit are tendencies. And the research is very clear that those tendencies need the right environmental factors to then be expressed. Your body turns genes on and off all the time. It doesn't turn off the ones for your eye color or your blood type, but most of all these other genes are being turned on and off based on environmental stimulus, like diet.
Okay, because there are programs of people who have been diagnosed diabetes type 2 that have gotten into a fairly rigorous exercise and diet program and have reversed all those numbers.
Exactly. I consider most people are 100% reversible. Some people, when they've been diabetic for a long time, and it's this weird combination where they have the insulin resistance, but they also, the pancreas cells have stopped making insulin at the same time. It's much harder to get those folks turned around.
Okay.
But everybody else, one specific case, this is rare, but I had one gentleman who came to me on 3 diabetes medicines and 2 blood pressure medicines.
Wow.
I put him on a very aggressive diet, which was actually 80% fat by calories.
Really?
Most of the fat was olives, olive oil, and avocados.
Okay.
And in a month, he had to stop all his drugs because he kept having low blood sugar and low blood pressure spells. So I had to say stop everything.
So, but if a person is suffering with diabetes for a long time and doesn't go on to this preventative or corrective measure of diet and exercise, and some damage is done, can that be healed, or you have to just manage that?
That's the big question.
Okay.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Some damage may be healed. You can certainly keep it from progressing. I've seen people get better. So because it's always a question, how much of that damage is permanent? You never know unless you treat the person and find out.
All right.
So, but yes, I always come from a perspective with someone that let's see how reversible this is.
All right. The big question for me, it appears that diabetes is heading towards either pandemic or epidemic. I don't know. The numbers are not good.
Right.
And so is cancer. In my opinion, cancer is epidemic.
Right.
We're treating it like it's a bad oil change. I mean, it's just amazing.
Exactly.
Is there any connection?
There's a connection at the root, because cancer is also, in my experience, can be caused by diet stress and environmental toxins, and it's our friend inflammation that's at the root of both of them. So that they're not necessarily causing each other, but they are both being caused by the same underlying factors. However, if you have higher blood sugars, and you don't even have to be diabetic, you can be pre-diabetic. Cancer cells, by their nature, can only metabolize glucose for energy. So if your blood glucoses are higher, you're going to be feeding a cancer if it's there. So there can be a link in that department too. But it's the chronic inflammation that we've talked about over and over that's at the root of both of them, and as well as heart disease. So that's why you have diabetes, heart disease, cancer. These are the major diseases of modern society.
You're the doctor. I'm certainly not. I just thinking there's got to be some kind of an environmental link or food supply link or something, because these things seem to be out of control.
It's all of it. That's the problem.
Okay.
And I won't get too far into this, but our entire economy and culture runs on these things, and that's the bigger argument as to why it's going to be so difficult to change this, because it is a runaway train.
All right, let's go to youth obesity and links to diabetes.
Right.
What is that?
Absolutely. That's the complete thing. The youth obesity is coming from poor diets, certainly in inner cities, high intake of high fructose corn syrup. We've known since early days that fructose, the fruit sugar, induces a low-grade insulin resistance. That's why we ate those fruits, for the most part, in the late summer into the fall, when we were fattening up for the winter.
Right.
So a certain amount of fructose was healthy during that time. When we have high levels all year long, then that is inducing the insulin resistance, and mostly we're seeing it in kids through soda intake and our processed food diets. So, eating processed cereal for breakfast, and cereal and juice is an all sugar breakfast, and then you have these kids drinking sodas and all of that. So absolutely, you have obesity, and then you have the inactivity, so that the muscles are not working properly to use the insulin, and that's why we do have 16-year-olds with now what used to be called adult onset diabetes.
Women obesity and diabetes, is there a connect there?
Obesity by itself, but not all the time. So you can have obesity with the right environmental factors, with the right genetic issues, is going to be playing a role, because especially that fat tissue that's around the belly tends to induce hormonal changes and insulin resistance that will go along with that. But as people know, not everyone who is obese is diabetic, and there are these other factors that can be involved.
All right. It appears that we are addicted to sugar and we may not know it. I mean, it's in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing, I've always said, if you want to know if you're addicted to something, try stopping it.
Exactly. or I know when I mention stopping it or decreasing it in the office, and people's eyes get very big, then I know it's a problem.
Okay, but isn't sugar kind of like the main contributor to
well, that's, it's the processed,
but there's sugar in everything,
but also the even, what we would call high glycemic foods, which has to do with, they tend to induce blood sugar more forcefully. So it's flour products in general, from processed flours. So it's the bread, pasta, crackers, chips, cookies, cereal, tortillas, et cetera, et cetera. Sugar playing a role in there. White potatoes have a glycemic index of 98 when pure glucose is 100. So white potatoes also, they basically have turned into pure sugar by the time they hit your stomach.
All right, so it's all have to do with insulin in one shape or a form or another, and there's different ways of getting insulin. We see it orally, through infusion, in others. It's an amazing thing.
Well, yeah, in this case, though, again, with the adult diabetes, it's the resistance to the insulin, and this is the problem, that the body is not sensitive to it because of the biochemical changes that have happened. So, yes, people wind up having to take insulin, but that winds up making things worse in many respects, because they already have high insulin levels if they're a type 2 diabetic, but their body is not responding to it. But we need to give them the insulin in some cases to bring the blood sugar down, but what that's going to do is make them gain weight and may even increase inflammation. So it's a lot of it's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, and I've often heard when somebody's having a diabetic seizure, you give them a candy bar. I go,
well, that's hypoglycemic, and that usually occurs again in the type 1 diabetics who are taking insulin. They're much more sensitive. Type 2 diabetics rarely, unless they're on too much medicine, have a hypoglycemic spell. All
right. We'll take a quick break. Dr. Joel Klein's with us. He's with Ventana Wellness, and you may want to Google Ventana Wellness and bring up the website. It's great, and he's a great doctor. If you're looking for one, there's one right there. We'll be right back. Dr. Joel Klein's with us today from Ventana Wellness, and you may want to check out Ventana Wellness Clinic, and there's a host of really great professionals there, and Dr. Klein's one of them. What's your specialty? Everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm still board certified in family practice, family medicine, so I kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah. But we really work on these kind of, what I do personally, these kind of functional illnesses, all the things that more than people realize are related to diet, stress issues, what's happening with our gut systems, hormones, and those kind of things. And
I really appreciate the fact that you really work on the diet issue, because I think a lot of our illnesses certainly stem from that. And let's talk about that. I mean, if you got somebody that's been diagnosed, let's say type 2, and you want to get them on a diet, and they're hooked on all this other stuff, how do you move them into that area, and where do you eventually want them to go?
Well, where I want them to go, and then I don't know how to move someone. I know how to open the door and let them walk through. I don't find fear to be a good motivator. Oh, if you don't do this, you're going to, that doesn't usually work well for people. Yeah. But I let them see and just be aware more of their consequences. But what we want to be doing, in my experience, there are actually several ways to do this. What I found that works is getting people away from carbohydrates in general. So, like I say, we want to use some grains, and really, literally a cooked whole grain. Anything that comes in a box or a bag, I think really is I don't care what they say on it, is no good. Yeah. We want to get down on the starches and up particularly on the healthy fats. And like I say, the most healthy fat is actually, for diabetics, what's medicinal is what's in olive oil. And also olives, obviously, and avocados. What's called the omega-9 oleic acid fat is literally medicinal for those folks. And some doctors who are also experts in nutrition will recommend 4 tablespoons of olive oil a day somehow worked into the diet. based on that. But it really has to do with getting the carbohydrates down, especially at breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal to do that. If we can get insulin levels down at breakfast, that will hold us through the rest of the day. So not eating cereal, believe it or not, I don't, the old steak and eggs or something that's more protein and fat with a little bit of carbohydrate is going to be a much better breakfast and hold people better through the rest of the day in terms of keeping their insulin levels down.
All right. Wow. There you go. I mean, that's free advice. So there it is. Exercise.
Essential, especially depending how far along you are, because most of this insulin resistance occurs in the muscles, that they're not responding to it. So in order to get the only way to get glucose into the muscle without insulin, because we have to bypass that pathway, is the exercise. And that in and of itself has beneficial effects. That can be a problem depending on how far along people are, and they've already got these complications from diabetes. Let's say they have arthritis, they have other issues. Well, you have to figure out what you can do. Pool exercise, swim programs, an exercise bike or something. But the aerobic exercise is the most important, but also some strength training, because increasing your body's muscle mass also helps decrease the insulin resistance over time.
Okay, because a lot of people will go out, especially the first year, and they'll overdo it, and they're good for about 4 weeks, and they're
right, and that never works.
Yeah, so
right,
just start walking. How about
find something you enjoy doing and do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and even walking at a brisk pace. And the best thing, and the hardest thing to do this time of year, I understand, is to do the exercise first, and then in the morning, and then have the low carbohydrate, higher protein, higher fat breakfast. Again, that sets your insulin thermostat low for literally the rest of the day, so that your insulin response to lunch actually has more to do with what you ate for breakfast. So what you do first thing in the morning is actually the most important.
Now, are you into these snacks throughout the day?
Yes, if they're higher protein, higher fat, and not glycemic things. People can use protein powders. There are bars that are made specifically for folks to do like that if they have to spread things out.
Okay. I'm just amazed at this whole diabetes thing, that we don't take it more seriously, and a lot of this can be prevented, can it?
100% of it.
Okay.
I mean, Dr. Lee Broadhurst, who's at the USDA, I heard her at a conference one time. I think this is a little bit of exaggeration, but she wanted the dramatic effect, so she got up and her first words were, "Diabetes is not a disease. It is the natural outcome of the standard American diet."
Whoa.
I think it's 100% preventable of the type 2.
Yeah.
But not the way we live and the way we eat. It's all geared. I mean, it couldn't be more perfectly designed to create a country where a third of people are diabetics.
All right. So what can you say to the mom who really is trying hard to put this diet together for their children, and yet they go to school and they're plagued with all the sodas and everything else like that? What can mom do to look at this situation?
You have to keep encouraging. You can do what's at home now. Fortunately, now they're getting now they realize, paying the companies to make money for the school by poisoning our kids maybe is not such a great idea, so maybe we need to get the soda machines out of the schools.
Yeah.
And try to you do the best you can under those influences, but at least you need to be moving away from the processed foods. And we've gotten to the point where we reward our kids with cookies and crackers, and we start them very young when they come in with the goldfish, and I see them with the Cheerios and these types of things. And I know it's tough that they're getting messages through the ether, not even through television, but we need to get to more healthy snacks and start encouraging at a younger age. They're going to be naturally attracted to those things. So the best thing you can do is just keep being an influence and moving things in the other direction, but at least limit the real sugary foods and certainly the snacks and the sodas.
Can you overdo the protein thing when you're battling?
Yeah, diabetes? You don't want to do all protein, but you want to do, but again, higher quality protein. This is a much longer story. We probably have to do a whole show on this, where it's actually saturated fat is not bad. It's probably the absence of the healthy fat in the meat that is the problem. So grass-fed being better. But yes, you can do too much protein. So I tell people in general, take your dinner plate, and if half of it is vegetables, and not potatoes, but non-starchy vegetables, maybe a quarter a whole cooked grain and a quarter the protein, you're going to be around the right percentages in there. You don't want to do a lot of protein, actually will clog up the kidneys. So it's about a balance. But the main thing is we already have too much heavy on the starches. So we want to cut those back and actually go to things with the healthy fats.
All right. I think we all experience these sugar spikes, the ups and the downs. And what is the normal blood sugar level?
Well, fasting depends on who you talk to. There's some real aggressive folks who feel like your fasting sugar should be below 70. It certainly should be below 90 to 100. You get in the 100 to 125 is this borderline pre-diabetes range, and then above 125 is where they draw the line and call it diabetes if it's consistently there. Then after a meal, typically in the 140 range, there may be 160, but usually around 140. But most people aren't testing there. The main thing we do is use this thing called a hemoglobin A1C or glycohemoglobin that tells us over 3 months what your average blood sugar has been, and that's a much better marker for where people have been long term rather than single determinations.
Whoa. Well, I'm just amazed that we're actually tolerating it. We don't fight it a little bit more aggressively. That's the part of it I don't get, because all the numbers there. Why aren't we fighting this thing?
Well, because we'd rather fight what we're all trying to do to try to pay for this obscenely expensive healthcare system that makes everybody money. So we'd much rather fight about that than fight about the real causes. Don't get me started on that one.
No, well, maybe just, I only got a couple minutes left, but are you being affected by this so-called plan?
We don't know what's going on. No.
You don't know what's happening?
No, and we're going to see what happens with these cover Oregon people as far as we're concerned. Yeah. I think the concern is more what's going to happen down the line with it. But, yeah, I was tempted to say something if you asked me about this, but I think I ought to keep my mouth shut. Well, I won't.
No, go ahead. I mean, hey.
I think, you ask me, I think both sides. I think that I feel, people say, what do you feel about Obamacare? I says, well, I feel the same about it, quite frankly, and your listeners may not agree with me, that I felt about the Iraq War.
Okay.
I didn't agree with it, but now that it's official policy, I think we should be doing everything to see if we can let things succeed and not try to undermine, no matter how much we feel against it. I think that's, 45 years ago, it was my country, right or wrong.
Yeah.
Right or wrong.
Yeah.
So in this case, I think it's wrong, but and I think they're going about it. I think it's the wrong discussion.
Yeah.
They're trying to pay for this system where everybody's being made sick. But I think if we're going to try this thing to get these people where bankruptcy is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical bills. Mm-hmm. Do we want to try to be helping people with that? Is this the best way? I don't know. But now that it's the law, I think, or that we should at least give it a try and see if we can get it to work for people.
Well, I think the problem is we can't get it to the try mode.
Well, yeah. No argument there, and
if we can get to the try mode, we'll try it.
I understand, and of course, yes, we know the road to hell is paved with good intentions as well.
Yeah.
But if all the entrepreneurs out there gave up the first time things went wrong in their business, they wouldn't have a business.
All right. Back to diabetes, just from the last couple moments we have. If somebody is now being treated for diabetes, but they feel that there must be something else I can do besides just being stuck on insulin the rest of my life.
Or the medicines, right.
Or medicines.
Right.
Can they come to you?
Absolutely, because that's one of my favorite things to do is get people off their diabetes and blood pressure medicines.
Okay.
But you can't do it without an aggressive diet. So that's why I say, look, you either take the medicines or you change the diet. There's really no other choice that I know of. We can use nutritional supplements, and they're very helpful, but without the right diet, it's not. And then we find, once I work with people, that we can slowly wean them, as their body tolerates, off of their medicines as much as possible. And we get a lot of people down off their meds, or at least on much less medicine than they were on before.
Well, there you go. If you want a second opinion, or maybe you're getting the symptoms and you want the first opinion, get a hold of Dr. Joel Klein. He's with Ventana Wellness, and have him check you out, because and be careful through this upcoming holiday season. There's a lot of temptations out there, and I'm not trying to be the Scrooge of all of this, but moderation,
exactly. And
how about flushing it down with a lot of water?
I have to give my speech every year. Do we really think Christ wants us honoring his birthday by making ourselves sick? I mean, have a good time, but honor this vehicle you were given as well. And, don't go crazy.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Klein, for being here. And again, check him out at Ventana Wellness. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.